Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Biohacking Beauty podcast. Today, I'm here with Dr. Nick Bitz, who is a naturopathic physician that specializes in ayurvedic medicine. He is a leading voice in the natural products industry and currently serves as Senior Vice President of Product Development at Neurohacker Collective and their product line Qualia. His area of expertise includes nootropics, anti-aging medicine, biohacking, herbology, nutrition, and dietary supplements. We had a fantastic conversation that you're going to listen to right now around the topic of senolytics and senescence and cellular senescence, which I absolutely loved and is obviously a passion of ours here at Young Goose and the Biohacking Beauty podcast. A few takeaways that you'll take from this conversation is first and foremost understanding senescent cells, understanding approaches to eliminate senescent cells, and obviously how we can do it specifically in the skin and in the rest of our body to improve our overall health and appearance. Before we dive into our conversation today, I first want to share a review from our valued Biohacking Beauty listeners. So this is by a person named Jake, saying, I've been listening to this podcast for the past year, and I must say it's been my favorite podcast to listen to. So much knowledge about biohacking, a must listen. So thank you, Jake. If you haven't done so already, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take 2 seconds out of your day to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Even one word review would be amazing, since your rating and reviews greatly help with the growth of this podcast, which helps us educate more people and reach more people and change their life through changing their appearance, changing their health, etc. Okay, now let's get into our conversation with Dr. Nick Bitz. All right, Nick, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast. It's been a long time coming, and I'm super excited to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Super excited to be here.
Amazing. So this conversation that we're going to have today is one of the things that I'm most interested in, longevity in general. Maybe just, I think that's not only me. I think it's one of the most interesting things that a person can engage in, and that is a conversation around senescent cells. So just to clue people in, I asked to have you on because you're the expert on senescent cells for the brand Neurohacker Collective and their product Qualia, which I take, and I'm a firm, as everyone that listens to this podcast know, that I'm a firm believer in Qualia products. And so maybe we can start by you telling us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you end up being an expert in senescence and treating senescent cells, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So it's been a long time coming. You know, I am by training, I'm a naturopathic physician. I specialize in ayurvedic medicine, which is the traditional form of medicine from India, widely considered the first form of medicine. It's been around for, some say, 5,000 years. And that really kind of paints how I see the world and how I practice medicine. But I've been in the dietary supplement space now for about 2 decades as a product formulator. I've created a lot of products that you can find at Costco and Whole Foods, and now with the brand called Qualia. And Qualia is a new passion project for me. They focus on nootropic products and longevity products. So products that enhance brain performance, and then products that can support health span, and really just support vibrancy and wellness overall. So, in doing a deep dive into the longevity space, there are some pretty good products out there. When you get into, as an example, collagen, a really fundamental, foundational beauty nutrient, I think that's firmly planted in this area of longevity. And I've been, formulating with collagen for over a decade, taking collagen for many years, diving into the research there. But there's a lot of new research, and that to me is the most exciting thing. And I think there's a lot of overlap when you get into the longevity space as well as the beauty space. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap there that's really neat. I think that's kind of the sweet spot that we're hopefully going to find today.
To be honest with you, I think, in America and marketing, as a foreigner, as an immigrant, it's always interesting to me to see how the language really is becoming a heuristic language. For the last 20 years, it's not common to hear the word discount rather than the word savings, and so on and so forth. And it seems to me that longevity is now really replacing the word anti-aging, and even the word anti-aging has been used to to promise results that you're going to see tomorrow, even though the word anti-aging doesn't actually, it is as vague as longevity, right? It kind of promises maybe to combat aging, but there is no real promise within that phrase that promises, to look better tomorrow or to feel better tomorrow. So I do think that the point that you're raising, it's kind of a there are 2 points there. First, the fact that we should be interested more in our health span, in our longevity, in the way that we're going to function 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. But the other side of it is what baggage, what emotional baggage comes now with the word longevity, anti-aging, whatever that is, and what people expect to get when they are expecting to get more longevity, right?
It's a really interesting point, and I think that is well put in a lot of ways. I think that the essence is the same, but I think ultimately they have different meanings when you get into anti-aging and longevity and health span. I like to look at the positive side of everything. It's like I'm really focused on enhancing health, not fighting disease. And fundamentally they're the same, but really they're entirely different approaches to everything. And so I think when you focus on anti-aging versus healthy aging and longevity, there's some similarities there, but I think there's some distinctions that are really important. So I'm glad that the industry as a whole now is evolving away from the anti-aging movement into this kind of wellness movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we can, the discussion around the language that we're using and what it means around the habits that we are forming in correlation with that language is an important conversation. And I think within that we can see that the industry is really looking for new phrases, whether it is a beautiful branding process that, for example, a place like Restore Wellness has done with saying hyper wellness. I think it's a great, I think they did a great job there.
Yeah.
Whether it is, phrases like, I saw an ad on Instagram saying root cause medicine, things really, we are all trying to get to the same root cause, to the same upstream, if you would. David Sinclair used to say a lot of the times, like upstream causes, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically, okay, we cannot change everything, but what we can definitely do is make sure that your body, whatever body part we're talking about, the skin, your heart, your liver, your muscles, whatever that, your bones, whatever that is, functions in a more youthful state for a longer period of time. Yeah, would this be kind of the meta definition you would use, or how do you view, beyond the words, how do you view the general aspiration for youth and the endeavor that we're trying to do there?
For me, it's just really all about optimizing what you have, and just living better, and
Yeah.
putting the emphasis there rather than coming from a place of fear and trying to push certain things away and suppress this and, palliate this. Like, can we just focus on the wellness? How do we optimize happiness? And so,
Yeah.
it's like if you walk into a dark room, um, you generally, you don't push away the darkness. You just turn on the light. And I find that now is becoming more and more of the emphasis of a lot of brands and a lot of influencers and a lot of integrative physicians. And I love it. I mean, you need to be careful though, because there are a lot of people talking about targeting the root cause, and whether or not they do that sometimes can be questionable.
Yeah.
And I do want to point that out. So I do think that there is some marketing built into this as well, and we need to be careful because it's a slippery slope. But I do think that is the direction that all of this conversation should be moving.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right, because I mean, as far as biology, most of the time, there's no one root cause. You remind me of of that fad that was present maybe like 10, 15 years ago, when they were talking about the warrior gene, the
Yeah.
whatever. And for the most part, unless there is one mistake in a gene, or one, you know, uh, let's say a rogue gene can cause problems. But normally, trying to fix a problem through one root cause would be very, very difficult, because there are many root causes, and things obviously are imperfect in many different levels as we grow older, as we stray away from our, most virile self. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and it gets into the hallmarks of aging. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
scientists now are looking at what actually causes aging. And previously, there were 9 hallmarks, but just recently there were 3 more that were added. So now we have 12 hallmarks of aging. And I think this really helps to kind of guide the conversation. These are, as far as we can tell, the primary drivers of the aging process.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps define that. It also helps define the direction of research. So how do we get in there and figure out one of those hallmarks? How do we undercut that hallmark so that then we are treating the root cause, in fact?
Yeah.
And so that's incredible. And some of those hallmarks too are of greater emphasis right
Mm-hmm.
now. We just added here in the last month or two. We added, as an example, microbiome disturbances to a hallmark. And so we all know that the microbiome, the gut flora, is critically important to health and well-being. And now it's part of that model of aging. It's one of those 12 factors that drives aging.
Yeah, it's funny. It's someone remarked that it's the second hallmark of aging where we blame something that is technically not our own. One is the microbiome. The second is our mitochondria. Right? These are their own separate organisms that are residing within us.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So going into that conversation, because we did have a podcast about the hallmarks of aging, and that's a very interesting few interesting things there. First, that many things that we can do, as far as, I'm going to use the word intervention, but really as far as lifestyle, will affect many things across the board. So which is, I'd say that, is really looking at the glass half full, because we can concentrate our efforts on things that would yield the best results, and not having to focus on 100 different things, or for that matter 12 different things that will move the needle. And the second thing is, we as you said, we can really understand what moves the needle, what will affect us for a long amount of time. And if we can tie it to the hallmarks of aging, great, we have something there. If not, it's really smoke and mirrors. If we go back to the conversation about skin aging and the appearance of youth, we can have Botox fillers. We're definitely not telling people to do or not to do them. But what we can say is that you are still aging in the background. There is nothing there that affects how the functional age of the skin, the biological age of the skin, and you probably should be addressing that if you want to look good in 10, 20 years.
Yeah, is it meaningful ultimately? And a
Yeah.
lot of people are okay with those short-term fixes, which is fine to your point. But is it actually fundamentally creating meaningful and significant change, both in the short term and in the long term? And I think that's where you need to dig in, and that's where I think the meat of this conversation really is.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of those um, pillars, if you would, or the 12 drivers of aging in the body, the one I am, there are a few that are fascinating to me. One that I feel like we can really we can really further research is that area of senescent cells. So first of all, let's just start with the fact that it is one of the hallmarks of aging. I mean, accumulation of senescent cells, right?
It is, yeah, and I think it's the most buzzworthy right now.
Yeah,
There's a lot of money, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of conversation around this in particular. I mean, we've all heard about mitochondrial dysfunction. We've heard
yeah,
about telomere attrition. We've heard about these things for years, and I think we've rounded out those conversations. But this conversation is just starting to emerge, and I
yeah.
think what I'm seeing is that the promise and the potential here is crazy big, and that really is what excites me. I don't think it's just a talking point. I don't think it's just mind fodder. I do think it's really interesting because it's going to create some meaningful change,
Yeah.
potentially game changing results down the line. And the nice thing is, this is available now, so people can start using some of these tools now to get the benefit that they're looking for.
Definitely, and this is one of those things that, unfortunately, if you're older, if you're not starting, let's say at the earlier you start, the better it is for you, because the more aggressive you need the intervention to be, there are drawbacks to that. So let's start talking about how would you explain to someone that's new to the conversation what senescent cells are.
Yeah, I think if you define the word senescence, I think it brings a lot of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Senescence means to grow old, in short. It really stems from a Latin word, and it just means to grow old. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're all going through senescence. We're all growing old. But the thing that separates cellular senescence is that we're talking about a specific cell, one cell, and what happens to that cell during the course of its life. And in short, what happens during cell senescence is that the cell has gone through its life cycle and it's expired.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's stopped dividing. And in most cases, the body will get rid of that. The immune system will get rid of that. It'll pluck it away and get rid of it. Or that cell will spontaneously just blow up, as it were, through a process called apoptosis. And that's normal, and that's good. And that happens most of the time. However, as we age, the immune system does diminish in function over time. And for whatever reason, these senescent cells tend to just linger in the body. And so these lingering, these kind of dead cells that are doing nothing, just taking up dead space, they end up just kind of taking over tissues, and they end up just sitting there. And so they change the tissue structure, they change the tissue function, um, and they secrete these molecules that just creates this microenvironment of inflammation, and so they can really disrupt the physiology in every tissue throughout the body. And so it is it is important that you're doing these things now so that you can prevent the accumulation and these problems due to cellular senescence as you age.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about it, is it something that, so as far as what you were saying, these are cells that are basically um, has finished their regular course of life, and now they lost the ability to contribute to the organism, and what's left behind is actually disruption. And we have a problem as we grow older to really create a cleanup mechanism for those, and it's like a snowball where the more there are, the more they infect other cells. Actually, Everyone who knows everyone who knows the word senescence probably knows that they are called zombie cells because they
Yeah.
infect other cells, etc. How did it start, actually, the name zombie cells? Do you know?
I think people just started hearing the mechanism and they
Mm-hmm.
immediately linked it up with this idea that they've read about in books or they may have
Mm-hmm.
seen in movies. But it's an apt title to call a senescent cell a zombie cell because in essence it's dead, but
Yeah.
it's infecting all the other cells around it and turning those cells into these old dead senescent cells. And so it's a very apt term. I think it creates some interesting imagery in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely like to talk about it because I think people get it when you refer to
Yeah.
it as that.
How about different systems in the body? Do we have systems that are more susceptible to accumulate senescent cells?
Yeah, I mean, we have 37 trillion cells in the human body,
Mm-hmm.
and they all are going through their life cycle, and they all are, for the most part, they're going to end in time. There are a couple exceptions to that rule. One of them being neurons in the brain; those are forever cells that you have one set of. You don't repair them, you don't replace them; they just exist.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, all of your cells and your tissues are going to get replaced at some point. Some within a very short window, such as white blood cells or the lining of your GI tract or skin. And then there are some that are much longer, such as muscles or hearts. And so they all are on their own kind of clock, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that we're finding that these senescent cells tend to just build up um, throughout the entire body. They can literally build up in any tissue in the body. So the liver, the prostate, the brain, the skin, as it were. And I think that we haven't really defined where they tend to accumulate most. I would say that it's different based upon the individual,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that because when you start giving these senolytic compounds, these compounds that can break down and help eliminate senescent cells, people get different effects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really contingent on how old you are, your gender, your health propensities. Perhaps there's a genetic component as well. Definitely a lifestyle component. So I think the potential is there for every tissue in the body. I wouldn't say that it predominates in any one tissue over another though.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, and you did mention senolytic compounds. So maybe before we understand how we treat it, a lot of for someone who's just really entering this conversation, they want to know how it looks like. When remember if you remember, like 10, 20 years ago, before they started to in Europe, before they started to print um, I mean, like horrific imagery on cigarette boxes. They explained, they maybe showed like a black lung or something like that, and it really, they understood that it works, that people need imagery in order to drive a point home. So how does senescence look like? Obviously, we can talk about the skin, but maybe other organs as well. Maybe
Mhm.
how does it feel like if we have senescence in the brain or in our muscles, or how do we experience senescence?
Yeah, I think everybody experiences it slightly different. But I will say, it's important to just conceptualize that as you age, senescent cells will accumulate, and at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, tissue function will decrease slowly over time. And so there definitely is that inverse relationship. Um, we do know that if you insert just a couple senescent cells into a mouse, a normal, healthy, vibrant mouse, you insert those directly into the joint capsule, it tends to spread like wildfire,
Mm-hmm.
actually. And so those just a couple cells, they tend to um, really capture the other cells around it, and it just creates, to your point, that snowball effect. And you can very quickly give a mouse joint problems just by inserting a couple cells. So we know that it can spread like wildfire, and we know generally that by the age of 40, 50, People have anywhere between 10 to 30% senescent cells in their
Wow.
tissues. And again, that can be really anywhere. It really is personalized based upon the person.
It's very interesting because, in contrast, for example, obviously no one likes to talk about cancer and cancerous cells, but in contrast, a lot of people, you know, the famous saying that men normally don't die from prostate cancer, but everyone dies with prostate cancer. So just to paint some contrast, a few cancerous cells, let's say, you know, wherever that, it actually is tissue dependent, but a few cancerous cells in your prostate are not going to spread like wildfire, and that process will take, you know, years and decades. So it's very interesting your point that a few senescent cells can then, you know, in a short amount of time affect the whole organism. um, so, so that's fascinating, and it's also fascinating to understand that anything that will increase the inflammatory load in the body would not only propagate itself more, but would propagate other things. It's like a shockwave, right? Would
Yeah.
propagate other things that are obviously pro-aging. So yeah, so let's talk about how do we how do we treat that? How do we address that? Is there a way to address senescent cells?
Yeah, I think this is where the good news comes in, and this is, I think, where it becomes more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is really early days. We're just discovering the potential here and what compounds do what in the body. But it really all started in 2015 when they discovered a combination of quercetin and dasatinib. Quercetin is a natural compound found in foods, widely used in the dietary supplement space for allergies and inflammation. And when you combine that with dasatinib, which is a cancer drug, that combination was shown to decrease senescent cell load as well as improve function in the body. And so it had really important outcomes, which I think is an important kind of litmus test for, is that meaningful? Of course, you can decrease senescent cells, but if it's not functionally felt and you don't increase human performance, really, what's the point? And so
Yeah.
this is where that whole idea started. That one paper in 2015 of that combination of quercetin and dasatinib really just opened the door for this whole field. And basically it opened it to this idea of it's called the Senolytic. And seno, again, senex means to grow old, and lysis means to destroy. And so senolytics are really anything that helps the body eliminate these senescent cells over time.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we're um, obsessed with it as far as Young Goose goes, the skincare company that we have. Um, Whether it is releasing a senolytic serum a couple years ago, publishing a study around it, whether it is really investing a lot of our R&D into finding more diverse and better ways to address that. And I love your point about functionality, because at the end of the day, let's talk about the skin for a second. If we did do anything that would require our skin to regenerate itself, because that's what happens when we grow old. Unfortunately, a wrinkle doesn't have a mechanism which alerts the body that it needs to be repaired. If we have a wrinkle, there's no inflammation around it. There's nothing that, unless the only mechanism is we're looking at the mirror and we get upset. That's the mechanism. Then there's nothing that communicates to the body that this should be treated. So the issue of functionality of the tissue is a big issue. If we do microneedling, if we do um, any kind of cosmetic procedure, whether it's a laser or it's plastic surgery, whatever that is, the artist, in that case the doctor, is reliant on the canvas to perform, if you would, which is the skin. And the more functional the tissue is, the better the results are going to be, period, whether it's our products, whether it's a professional, whatever that may be. And to this point, there is nothing better than a whole body senolytic process that you're going through. so yeah, so that's 2015, right? The
Yep.
satinib and quercetin. So what did, yeah, walk us through it. What happened since then, or what did they discover within those parameters of this course of action?
Yeah, I mean, I could take that conversation so many different directions. I will say that they have begun to one by one identify new compounds that
Hmm.
are senolytic in action, which is fantastic. There was a study in 2018 where they looked at I think it was 10 different polyphenols,
Hmm.
including like EGCG, resveratrol, some common ones that we know and love. But they found that fisetin was the most potent senolytic. And so, because of that study, they have now used fisetin in a number of studies, and there's a number of clinicals that are coming down the line that are using fisetin as well, because we know that it's very effective and very powerful in its senolytic effects. So that's number one. So it's really interesting when you get into these new novel compounds. The second thing that has, I think, arisen from the research over the last couple of years is that we've been able to really tease out how senescent cells survive, and as effect of that, we know how we can undercut that effect to in short, get rid of these cells from the body. And so, just in short, these senescent cells have really interesting pro-survival proteins. They upregulate these proteins, which in effect really shields them from apoptosis. So the body then doesn't get rid of them, and they don't naturally prune away, as it were. And so we know how we can get in there, disrupt those pro-survival proteins, and then allow it to get back on course to its natural falling off process, which is that apoptosis, that kind of dying off process. And so we can go and we can study those various mechanisms, and we can figure out how these compounds get in there and disrupt that flow, so that the cell then can just leave the body.
Interesting. That's great. So yeah, you mentioned fisetin, which so okay. So you mentioned those compounds. We don't use fisetin specifically because it is, and I want to get to it actually. That's something that isn't necessarily something you would use on on everyday basis. Um, and we, since skincare needs to also make sense within your schedule, we do use compounds that are much easier to be used on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Um, but how
Yes.
how about we jump forward? Kind of, the conclusion is, Qualia comes out with a basically a product that you take for 2 days a month. So walk us through, why would a product be taken 2 days a month? What's the protocol of addressing those senescent cells, etc.?
Yeah, so it seems fantastical to say this product you only need to take it 2 times per month and it works. But that's what the research has shown. There's a process called intermittent dosing, which means basically you do this very short protocol, and then you give the body a rest and you let the effects kind of do their magic over time. And that's how Senolytics work best. So Senolytics are not meant to be used every single day. And the studies have shown that continuous dosing of these senolytic compounds is just not as effective as doing that kind of hit and run approach, where you do 1 or 2 heavy days of senolytic compounds and then you take a break. And so that's really how the great majority of senolytic studies are designed presently. And I think that will be the case moving forward. It does decrease the potential for side effects, which is great. But these compounds really hone in, and they're very selective to senolytic cells in the body. So they're not affecting normal healthy cells, because they're going in, they're disrupting this abnormal upregulated protein that these senescent cells express. So they do target senescent cells only, and you don't get a die off as it were. When you do like a detox protocol, people will often feel lousy for several days because they're accumulating these metabolic byproducts that the body then has to get rid of. This is not like that at all. It's much more benign. And I've been taking this protocol now for the last 6 months since we launched the product. And for me, it's not felt in any adverse way. It's felt physiologically, and I feel the
Mhm.
benefits, especially in my joints. But it's not something that people feel lousy when they take. So that the intermittent dosing is a critical factor, really, to any senolytic regimen, and so that's no different to the Qualia senolytic product.
Mhm. First of all, very interesting. So, number one, um, I would say that most of the time, since the makeup of a joint requires the same building blocks a lot of the times as our skin, whether it is hyaluronic acid, whether it is collagen, um, a few other connective tissues, um, hydration, for example. So most of the time we can infer that whatever is healthy for our joints is then going to be expressed in the skin as well. So that's good news when you're saying, oh, I can feel it in my joints, and I can attest to that as well. um, the second thing is, okay, so we can definitely accept the relationship between, if you would, stimulation and reaction in the body. I mean, if we really want to create optimal results in most things, it's almost as important the space you allow the body to then perform the tasks that you triggered, rather than triggering and triggering and triggering. Obviously, the easiest example is if you went to the gym and worked out in the same way every day, you would be burning you're going to be burning out, and you're not going to let your body recover. Or if you want to talk about sleep, if you worked all the time, didn't give your body time to recover and sleep, that's not going to create great benefits. So definitely that is, again, 2 days out of the month is really unique and special and great. But the other, let's say, 28 days that we're asking the body to then perform the tasks are as important. You know, and within those parameters, what are some of the things that we can do in order to perfect those days, the off days, if you would? What are some of the things that you recommend to do or to avoid?
Yeah, I think if you want to support the process of senescence and you really want to counter that in the best way, it really gets down to some of the lifestyle recommendations that you mentioned. Sleep is absolutely critical. I will throw in there immune support, making sure that you're not overworking your immune system, to make sure that your immune system is able to go and survey the body and find these senescent cells that are there and then help the body get rid of them. And so we do know there's a process called immunosenescence, which immune cells, just like every other cell in the body, become senescent over time. And so, generally, again, after the age of 40 or so, people tend to have diminished function of their immune cells because they become senescent and they become zombie cells, as it were. And so, Senolytics can help really change that picture, but it is important to make sure that you're creating a really strong, robust immune system from the ground up. And so, there's a lot of things you can do on that front. Of course, I look first at the gut, the microbiome, and make sure that we're optimizing that. And of course, there's a huge relationship to the gut and the skin, which is going to be a whole nother field that's emerging in the next 2 or 3 years, no doubt. But so taking care of your immune system is critically important. I would also say that you can help prime these senescent cells by eating less food. So, a calorie restriction diet, a low calorie diet, um, uh, those things can be super helpful just to help really prime these senescent cells for elimination from the body.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and that is through that buzzworthy pathway mTOR, right? That's kind of our litmus test, if you would, for um, if something would support senolytic senolytic compounds or effects, right? What state is our mTOR pathway? How is it behaving? So could you talk a little bit about that pathway and why what's the connection between that pathway and longevity in general? Yeah, but senescent cells specifically.
Yeah, I mean, mTOR is interesting. My verdict is still out on mTOR. I think there's a lot of varying opinions about do you want it high, do you want it low, and for me, it's really all about the middle path. I think in everything, I'm not one to like to go to any extreme and push anything very strongly in one direction, and so I like to normalize physiology and then just support the body rather than override. But there are certain things that you can do to optimize. And I think that's the critical piece here when it comes to biohacking. Just optimizing everything that you have is critically important first.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think you did mention biohacking, and I do think that biohacking really is trying to take advantage of environments that did not exist. Millions and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands years ago, when we were evolving as a human being, and really understanding that we can fluctuate between different environments to get the optimal results.
Yeah.
And I think, mTOR is a wonderful example of that, which is this kind of a thermostat of thriving that we have in the body, and really signaling the body that we're sometimes, thriving, and sometimes we're in some kind of deprived state. Really, that kind of push and pull creates a very healthy human being, and a very resilient human being, if you would. So I couldn't agree more. What about, so going into that little vantage point of time, or calorie restriction, and let's say the Qualia senolytic compound. Okay, let's say we were looking at those two things. Would you recommend a specific, or did you see specific fasting protocols being effective, or are you talking only about really, just lowering or creating like a 10 to 30% um, calorie deficit?
Yeah, great question. I would say that the fasting mimicking diet is probably the most buttoned up for this. The recommendations there are um, very well designed, and so I think that that's a good place to look. And we know that when you fast or when you lower your calorie input, it really supports autophagy. And again, that term autophagy is widely a part of most biohacking conversation these days. And autophagy is a really interesting process. In short, it's just how cells repair themselves. And so when you support autophagy, you're supporting cell repair so that cells then can get back to their healthy state rather than moving to senescence.
Hmm.
And so it's critically important to support autophagy through nutrition, through fasting mimicking diet. So that's where I would look first and foremost. With that said, you have to tease out a lot of important details and personalize it for you. I don't think that there's any one specific protocol that really suits every person. Again, my background is in Ayurveda,
Hmm.
and I'm looking at the individual and I'm looking at body types. And so I know specifically from my body type, which is a Vata body type, I should not skip meals ever. It's awful for my physiology. It's awful for my brain. It's awful for my skin. It's literally the antithesis of health and wellness for my specific body
Hmm.
type. However, there are individuals, a kapha body type, as it were, that can miss meals and that should miss meals in order to be optimally well and healthy.
Great. I mean, yeah, for sure. If anyone, I'm just gonna, we both Neurohacker Collective and Young Goose have this amazing friend that is called Bob Turia, or Quantified Bob. which has a fantastic blog about the fasting mimicking diet and some variations that people can introduce into that diet. So if anyone wants to do a deep dive on that, I highly recommend it. Obviously, if you just wanted to go and go on Walter Longo's website, I don't know how you order the fasting mimicking diet. Every time we bought it was in like a conference or something. So um, they can definitely do that. But yeah, definitely a very very easy tool as far as introducing calorie restriction. Yeah, so that's a great point. How about counterindications or risks? Again, like what do we want to look out for if we are looking at introducing senolytic, Qualia senolytic, for example, or any kind of anti-senescent protocol into our life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential theoretical risks, but none of them are bearing any weight
Mm-hmm.
when you get to the clinical aspect of it. And in part because that intermittent dosing mechanism really uh, more or less prevents a lot of the adverse effects that may theoretically show up. But um, really, you want to make sure that you're. I mean, you can use it at a younger age, but I would highly recommend using it if you're over the age of 40. And you don't need to do it every single month. You certainly can, but try to do it seasonally
Mm-hmm.
or do it in place of like a detox. You know, people tend to do like a detox diet for a day or two in the middle of spring. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that is completely advisable as well. So I think if you're using these known senolytic compounds in the right dose and in the right timing, I don't see there's really any contraindications or any issues that you should notice. Theoretically, anybody that has a pretty serious wound probably would not want to use senolytics for that moment because wounds need those senescent cells as part of the repair and regeneration mechanism. So it's critically important to allow the body then to kind of repair that wound rather than get in there and disrupt the senescent cell load in the wound specifically.
Mm-hmm. Would that be also because most of those compounds lower kind of systemic inflammation as well? And then when we are looking at repair in general, wound repair for that matter, we need to rely on those inflammatory signals to then, recruit more, whatever that is, more repair attention to that area.
Yeah, I think that's just exactly it. I mean, when you get into inflammation, you want inflammation. It's critically important for the body. When you undercut that entirely, it creates problems. So again, it's finding that sweet spot. You do need a little bit of inflammation, not too much, not too little,
Mm-hmm.
but that helps stimulate the body to repair itself. So yes, so senolytics, as it were, can really lower your inflammation load because those senescent cells are giving off these inflammatory compounds. And so when you're doing that, you're going to lower your inflammation load as a whole. So there is a potential risk there. Yes.
Interesting. It's beautiful, and I do think in the end of the day, the word that I like the most, maybe because I'm male, I love the words resilience. I think I think we don't. I don't think we age. I mean, what it always reminds me is a research, and I think I say it probably every like fourth podcast. I refer to this research looking at the way that babies and children gain height, and they measured them every day, and they don't gain any height like for 3 days, and then they're going to have a growth spurt that is defying all reason. They're going to grow like a few centimeters overnight. Um, and I think we also age, obviously not exactly like that. Our body doesn't decide to age overnight, but we age in spurts as well. There is either a mental or physical exertion slash environmental disruption, whatever that is. And we age in relation to how resilient we are at that point in time. Obviously, we can also look at how people reacted to anything from COVID to a flu to anything really, to an injury, whatever that is. And most of the time when people ask us as a company, I'm going to tell you a secret. We, as heads of the company, we really need to keep our hand on the pulse of the most frequently asked questions. So we have sessions where we get those questions from our customer service representatives. We get new questions that are coming up, and we give answers to them, which then propagate throughout the system. Um, and most people ask, when will I see results? How will those results look like? In other words, how do I know that the product is right for me, wrong for me, whatever that is? And even though we do have very short answers saying, it takes 4 weeks, it takes 6 weeks, whatever that is, what I really would like to tell that person, if I could be the angel whispering in their ear, is that the best products are going to make you resilient for the next time where you need resilience,
Mm,
whether it is in the skin or in the body. And
yeah.
that is, from all of our conversation, this is what really strikes me as the truest form of senolytic treatment. It's how do we prepare the body for the next onslaught of fill in the blank? How will our body, how youthful, functionally youthful will the body react to the next challenge?
I love that. I think you nailed it. And I think that's the essence of what everybody's now aspiring to from a
Mm-hmm.
nutrition or a wellness protocol or whatever it may be. And I love that.
Yeah. So Nick, listen, time flew. Normally we try to keep it at 45 minutes to have it digestible for people. But I think this conversation is a very good introductory conversation, and I do think that this is an experience that everyone should be experiencing on their own, and as we said, over time. And um, I highly recommend. Again, I'm going to repeat it. The reason you are here, aside from the fact that you're an expert in a field that we're highly interested in, is because the product itself, Qualia Senolytic, is a product that we take and are thoroughly impressed by. We love Qualia as a whole. So please just let people know a few things. Where can they? Obviously, everything's going to be in the show notes, but where can they both learn more from you, and also where can they learn more about Qualia, what they offer, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, Neurohacker Collective is a very science first brand. We do a lot of writing, a lot of blogs, we do a lot of podcasts. We love putting information out there. And so we populate our website, which is neurohacker.com,
Mm-hmm.
with a boatload of articles and information. A lot has been written already on senescence and Synolytic. We have articles that discuss in great depth how senescence relates to skin health and how Senolytics can potentially benefit skin health, which we didn't do a deep dive in that area, but the implications there are enormous. And we do build up senescent cells in the skin. And so they're intimately involved with um, the the function as well as the appearance of skin. And so there's a lot of really important implications there as well. So neurohacker.com is really the best place to learn more about our products, to learn more about cutting edge science. You can also give us a follow on social media. We are at all the major social media outlets.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention it. We didn't really. I feel that this is such a wide conversation, and people can benefit from really understanding senescence as a whole, and seeing the results in their skin. Um, and that is, we really try to cover all the bases today. But I would say that I don't know if you're familiar with a series of researches that were published in Portugal, I believe, about how senescence in the skin can, through the skin brain axis, actually affect brain function, brain inflammation, etc. So, uh, you know, definitely senescent load can affect how we look like, but the skin is also a driver of overall aging. And really keeping our skin truly youthful, not only the appearance of youth, but truly youthful, will benefit our body as a whole and vice versa, obviously. So I'm super thankful for your presence today. It was such a fun talk. I mean, this is exactly what this podcast is about. So I truly appreciate your time and I thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. It was really fun. Great topic. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Bye. Before we end today's episode, I'm going to take some time to answer some listener questions. If you would like your question to be answered on the podcast, you can ask your question in a review on Apple Podcasts, and we will be sure to answer it in our next episode or an episode that is appropriate for the question. So, actually, that's what we're doing now. We're answering a question that we got that relates to senescent cells. So, a customer reached out and asked us what products contain within them senolytic compounds, and the answer is that we have two products that are specifically containing senolytic compounds. One is our ProCare, which is a senolytic serum. That's what it's meant to do first and foremost. And the second one is C.A.R.E, our moisturizer. Since it has, as Nick mentioned on the podcast, it does have a few polyphenols that are very effective at clearing senescent cells over time if we use them over time, and another xenomorphic compound that is called astragaloside 4. This is also supporting telomere length, etc., which Nick did mention in the podcast today. Aside from that, another polyphenol that you can use in order to manage senescence, and Nick did mention it, is EGCG, and that is in our green tea phyto serum, especially if we use it together with red light therapy. So make sure you give these products a try, and over time they would really contribute to the way that your skin looks and functions. Another question that we had that relates to that, to this discussion, is what is the difference between C.A.R.E and ProCare? So actually, these products are named similarly because we would like people to use them together rather than one replacing the other. So you can think of ProCare as a specific trigger for your body to, or for your skin to eliminate senescent cells and support for that. And C.A.R.E as a kitchen sink approach to skin longevity. So it would have all the molecules like NAD precursors, resveratrol that is, specific patented form that's very bioavailable, and 10 other supporting ingredients, peptides, specific type of vitamin C, etc., that really support the way that your skin functions and have it function like a more youthful skin. So first we use ProCare, then we use C.A.R.E. We can mix and match them with other products. There's no problem there. Normally, if you want a little trick, understanding what product you should put before another, or going thin to thick. So whatever is thinner absorbs faster, we're applying first. Whatever is thicker, absorbing more slowly, we apply afterwards. The third question is, when should I see results from Young Goose products? So actually, we did talk about it on the podcast towards the end, but normally our products are designed that you will see improvement in your skin within 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. But really what I would like to take a second answering this question is to have you understand is that the real results are how you look in, 5 years, how you look in 10 years. Using our products on a daily basis for a long period of time, that is where the real magic happens. Having your skin function like a younger skin has extremely long-term benefits and effects. So commit to a system that you can, follow for a long period of time. You can follow us on social media, follow us, subscribe to our newsletter, and we provide ways to improve that system over time. So make sure you do that. Thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. Make sure you check us out on social media, Young Goose Skincare. Go to our website, younggoose.com. Reach out, ask us any question you would like. We would love to answer. Much love to everyone, and have a great rest of your week.